Hello again, friends. This is A Look in the Dark, Chapter 8, Windows, Part 2. Danny Green was anxious, and though he had told himself again and again that Carol had a strong survival instinct, he was also aware that he was dealing with a human who made a Dalek in Doctor Who seem warm-hearted. Come on, Dan, he thought. She's only seeing a man about a book. He's not going to shoot a customer for a book. Stop worrying. But he didn't stop worrying. And the time dragged, and as he waited for her to come, he felt the unease coming down on him like a cloud becoming fog on a mountainside. He was trying to make use of his time at the Natural History Museum in Kensington. He'd used the day well because he was trying to gather material for his children's articles. He could think of the great value of getting children to visit this amazing museum in order to fire their enthusiasm for wildlife. The first hour he'd spent in the bird gallery and had decided that it would be important for young folk to visit the Mauritius dodo that was in residence there. He wanted the kids to understand about the sad plight of this extinct creature and thus accelerate their concern for threatened creatures of the late 20th century. He had then toured other parts of the museum, and as he stood looking at the polar bear in the mammal section, he felt he had the conclusion for his article. He would have no problem persuading his young readership that this magnificent though fierce white monster was worthy of preservation. Yet all the time as he studied the exhibits and scribbled notes, he was conscious of that gloom of anxiety. Now as he stood at the place they'd chosen to meet, staring at the polar bear, but with his thoughts in a cloud, he was brought back to the museum suddenly. "Well, hello, polar bear, how you doing?" Her warm embrace and gentle kiss caused a and a look of disgust from an elderly lady who looked as if she could have come from the dinosaur area. Danny Green's cloud on the mountain turned to blue sky and sunlight. "So how goes the research, my little man?" "Okay." Danny knew she was teasing him, and he was so much wanting to hear how our meeting with the enemy had gone. "Oh, only okay. And did you spare any thought for the wife going out earning a living at all?" "I can see you did." "Well, how did it go?" "It was fine, Danny. Less than I could do with a walk." In a few minutes they were walking in Hyde Park, and Carol was expressing her joy at being in such an oasis right in the heart of the big city. Sitting on the grass near the water, she poured it all out to her husband. She described the whole visit and finished her account by telling him how she felt about Stanhurst. "I don't like him, Danny, at all. He gives me the creeps. But the great thing is his security looks pathetic. If we would choose the right time, I don't think getting in would be a big problem. And those records are not hard to get at either. I really liked his wee secretary, well, receptionist really. Nice kid, but if she was my daughter I wouldn't want her in there. I gave her an Irish history lesson, and she told me she only deals with the book stuff." Do you think she knows what goes on?" "I doubt it. She's just a wee girl that took a job. I think she's on the level, except that she needed her Irish history. You old Brits don't understand at all." "So you keep saying, Professor, do you really think we could get access?" I do. Do you know he's married? Yuck, can you imagine cuddling up to him? By the way, he thinks you're an American arms dealer. You're from Texas. We're touring Europe for business and pleasure. You know, Carol, before I married you, someone should have warned me that you were an accomplished and convincing con woman." "Ah, yeah, but nobody told me you were an English literary man either." Before leaving London, they had a snack in a bar, and Carol grumbled to Danny about the unfriendly bar staff. She felt they needed to do a month or two in an Irish bar to learn about friendliness. Danny told her that was unreasonable. "There must be unfriendly bars in Ireland too," he said. Carol grinned. "We used to have, but we burned them." As they travelled home, they discussed again the layout of Stanhurst's office. Danny was working out with Carol the next stage of their strategy. He was not thinking of this as a carefully worked out game of chess, because for a start, thus far Stanhurst didn't know any moves were being played against him. Anyway, Danny had never been much of a chess player, but he had become good at fieldcraft. He could read signs, and he knew where to look for birds. If a man wanted to see a stone chat, Danny knew what kind of countryside would probably provide one. But sometimes ornithology was an opportunist's occupation too. And he had to be out. He'd been out to watch waders, but had great views of raptors. Once he'd taken Carol to see a barn owl, and they spent an hour watching a young vixen with her first cubs instead. He knew that it paid to look in all directions, to listen carefully and to change plans when a good prospect presented itself. The field craft of Danny Green could not be learned from textbooks. It was like flying hours to a pilot. It was experience in all seasons, all weathers and many terrains. It was endurance, frustration, disappointment and drawing blanks. It was joy, even elation, and sometimes success, and native-like knowledge and wisdom. It was the understanding of being in a place and instinctively knowing what kind of creatures lived there. It was feeling as well as seeing and hearing. So when it came to Major Stanhurst, he was taking one careful step at a time, because as far as Danny was concerned, he and Carol were dealing with a rare and treacherous animal. Each step could be one that would lead to his capture, or one that could make the Greens his next victims. Right, Carol, tell me again about the yard at the back. The gate's open all the time, and the room I was in with Stanhurst, where he kept his records, is a first-floor room that looks down on the yard. There isn't a back door to his premises, but as far as I can tell, it would be easy to get in through that window. You could open it with your penknife, or a thin screwdriver. It's a sash window like your Aunt Susan's, and you got in there for her easily enough when she lost her keys, so you did. Yeah, and then she found them in her shopping bag after I nearly broke my neck up that ladder. Well, it was worth it to see your face when she produced them. So what you need, Dan, is a ladder and a good reason for being there on a Sunday. Are you sure you'll not be there on a Sunday? As far as I can be, I'm sure. He was most adamant about it. Can anyone see into this yard? People passing the gate can, and the cafe has a back entrance. Window cleaning's the answer. All we need is a van and some ladders, all the gear, and you know who would provide them. Don Blake. He's always ready to help, and we would make it worth his while anyway. Did his wife have those twins yet? I don't know. He was child-cross of talking about finding a signwriter to put his name on the van. Hope he hasn't done that yet. Don't want to put Don in danger. Mind you, Dan, we know how easy it is to trace a number plate. Is there a better way of doing this? We could ring that cop's number that Dave gave me, but we don't really have a lot to go by, do we? We don't have proof that those records you saw contain anything incriminating. No, Danny, it's too soon for that. It was in bed that night, back in room, that Danny reached a conclusion. He could think of no better idea to get into the office than the scheme that Carol had come up with, but he would not get a man not involved behind his back. They couldn't use Don Blake's van. They could borrow his equipment though. Danny was lying on his back thinking about it all. Carol was reading Dickens' Tale of Two Cities, one of the few classics she'd never read. Danny studied the ceiling as he thought. And as Carol set the book to one side, he took her hand in his. She leaned down and kissed his lips tenderly. I'm very proud of you, Carol. You really did so well today. But you do realise that if we go any further on our investigation, we're increasing the risk tenfold. Aye, I can see that. Pretending to want to buy a bird or a book is one thing, but gaining entry to the lion's lair is chancing it a bit. Yes, and he knows us both. Me as Nick Ashby and you as Mrs. McGovern. If he caught us together, well, it would be pretty obvious what we were up to. True, Danny boy. But I wouldn't be wanting to hand it over to anybody yet. I'm not sure that they, the police that is, would have the same passion about it as we do. Well, there might be men at Scotland Yard who would be glad to get Stanhurst, but I'd like evidence of connections, buyers, sellers, that kind of thing. I think access to that office might give us that. It might be one or two, but it could be so much more. So we know we have a choice. Phone the police now or keep going along the high wire, only now it's going to be like walking across Cheddar Gorge. Oh, husband dear, the views will be fantastic. So you're convinced that you and I should investigate Major Stanhurst's office? Yes. Aren't you? Yes. So those nice men from the yard you're talking about, how would they feel about a crazed Somerset man and a wild Irish girl breaking into a man's business premises? No doubt we'd be in serious trouble. I guess we would have to phone Dave's friend if they would let us. You'll be fine. You could pursue your career from Wormwood Scrubs. With my accent, I expect I'd be given hard labour at Holloway. No, they would give you a job in the library. So we're not using Don's van, are we? No, we'll buy one, something that's cheap but goes, and when we've finished our day's work, we'll scrap it. Ricky keeps saying we should use more of our expenses. We could sell it to a scrapyard in Bristol or somewhere and never really be its legal owners. Never be traced. Never be registered as its owners. I don't think Ricky will worry about £100 or something, do you? Our noble benefactor would probably suggest that we purchased a Porsche. So, they have a plan. What do you think of it? Sometimes amateurs make terrible mistakes. Sometimes amateurs have success. Let's see what happens in the next episode. Thank you for listening again, my friends. Bye bye for now. Take good care. Bye bye.